Hello guys, good evening everyone. Welcome to today's tutorial. Today I'm going to be showing you how you can implement Redux Toolkit into your Next.js application. So I'm going to be starting off with this starter template. I'll link it to the description of the video where you can pick up the project, clone it or download it and follow along the tutorial. So basically we have a project here that has been initialized for us. Here uh I have style component installed already, and the theme wrapper already installed, the day and night switch, but I'm not going to be showing that today. I'm just going to show you. Also, I have a toast notification, so I'm only going to be showing you how you can integrate Redux into your project. I'm not going to be going over this. So the packages we are going to be using, they are already in the package.json. Basically is React. Okay, I've not yet installed this Redux packages, but we'll be using JS cookie to manipulate the cookie to store our authentication data, our token in the cookie, rather than using local storage, because local storage is not safe and cookie is much more safer, and cookie is also accessible on the server, unlike local host, which is only in the client side. Also, we'll be using JWT decode to decode our token. And also so very quickly I'm going to be installing other packages. Also, I'm firstly going to install all the packages by running yarn. I'm using a yarn package manager, so I'm just going to run yarn to install the packages initially. And then also wow, see, that is already done. Oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong folder. I'm just going to seed into the correct folder, net of starter template, and run the yarn. Okay, so while we wait for it to install the packages, I'm just going to walk you through the application. So this is a simple application we have there. This is the layout. This is the landing page here. So basically the landing page contains two buttons, one that takes us to the dashboard and the other that takes us to the login page. So here you have the dashboard. You have the dashboard, just a simple page with the content centered, and we have the dashboard, and then the login is in the authentication route. You have the login page here, just a simple form, the form container containing of custom input, and I'm using ref to track the value of the input fields, because ref does not cause re-render unlike state. So I'm just going to be using that instead of installing another package. Instead of installing all these form handling packages, so I'm just going to be using that, and that is basically what is in the login page. So quickly we're going to install yarn add it's going to be Redux JS/toolkit and react redux. So let's add these two components quickly, and while we wait for it to be installed. So it has been installed. So quickly, let's run our application and see how it looks like. While we wait for it to on, going to my just gonna refresh this. This is from a previous application, so I'm gonna refresh the page here. Okay, let me open a new tab so that we can start afresh. Localhost 3000. So we have simply a dashboard and a login button. Clicking on the dashboard, it takes me to the dashboard route. So at the end of this tutorial, this is going to be a protected route. So if we are not authenticated, we won't be able to access the dashboard unless we are authenticated. So, and this will take us to the login page, which will not be protected. So this login page contains a simple form. So let's get to work. So the first thing I like to do is to work on the token service. So we're going to work on how to undo our token, the code base to undo our token. So I like to have an utils folder outside of the app directory. So I'll just add this utils, and inside the utils we'll create a token service, token.service.js. So I'm just going to paste the code in and then walk us through the code. So basically what we have here is we have a function for getting the access token. First of all, we have a function here for setting the access token in the cookie. So what we did here is it accepts the parameter which is the token, and then we decode the token to get the expiry date here, the access token and the refresh token, and get the access token, and then get the access token expiry date. And then from here we create the configuration for the cookie, which the setting as HTTP only false expires. It expires in the access token expiry date on the date that it's supposed to expire. We set it to expire then. The path should be the root of the application, same site strict, and then this secure flag checks the node env if we are on production or we are on development. So if you are on production, the secure is set to true, meaning that it can only be accessed, the token can only be accessed on a secure website on HTTPS. But if we are not in production, it will false, so we can access it in our application, which is just an HTTP, and not HTTPS. So that's just it. Then after setting the option for the cookie, we set the cookie here, cookies dot set access token. We pass in the token, the access token itself, and then the options to setting the cookie. And then we also have a function for accessing this token. We have a function for getting the token here, which constructs both the token as both the access and the refresh token. We get it from the cookie, and then if both of them exist, we create the token object which will contain of both of them and return the token object. So we also have a function here for getting just the access token, You can see here cookie.get access token return access token. We have a function for getting the user, which gets the access token and decodes it using the JWT decode. So it returns the user. So, and then we have another function for invalidating the cookie itself, the access token. So this removes the access token from the cookie, but leaves the refresh token, because we can still use the refresh token most times to request another access token. So this is just to get the expiry date of the token, of the refresh token. And this is to get the expiry date of the access token also. So that is basically that, and then we export each of the function here. So you can modify this function to suit your need. So after doing that, let's go straight to our Redux implementation. So for the Redux implementation, we're going to go into our app directory, create a folder, called Redux. So I'm going to create a Redux folder here, Redux folder, and then inside the Redux folder, we're going to have a couple of other folders. We're going to have our features folder also. So I'm going to create that once and for all, features. So after that, the first thing we want to do is create the instance of our API, which is going to be in the root of the Redux folder, api.js. I'm going to remove it from the, okay, I don't think, okay, it's in the root of the Redux folder already. So we also need to install Redux at this point. I mean, to install Axios. So that's going to be yarn add Axios. So while we wait for it to install, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to paste in the code for the API. So here, what we are basically doing is we are fetching the API link from our env. So that reminds me, I have an env in the root of the project. This is the env variable, the root of the project. So this env variable here, we have this route to the backend server and the route to the production, the backend production server here, and then node env, which is set to development. So if you're on production, you change this to production. So that is basically what's in the environment variable. So for Next.js to be able to access this environment variable, you must precede each of the variable with next underscore public underscore. So when Next sees this, it will make it available in the app. So after doing that, what we are doing here is fetching the API link. Depending on the environment we are on, if we are on production, we get the production link, else we get the development, the backend development link, and then we create our base query here using the link, the API link as the base URL here, set credentials as include, and prepare the header here. Here we get the token from the state, and check if the token has expired. So if token exists, we set the bearer's token. But if the token has expired, we add the X refresh header. So this is actually dependent on your backend. Some backend, you need to send a X refresh header to request for another access token once the access token expires. But it depends on which backend you are using. For others, you might need to just access another endpoint and request for a new access token. So those methods are already covered in this. So here where we now create our base query with re-authentication. So in the case whereby your access token is expired, then this will now run to get a new access token. So there are some backends that you need to hit a specific endpoint. For example, this, you need to hit a refresh endpoint, with your once you hit the refresh endpoint, it will generate for you another access token. So we check here if the backend is, if we're trying to access an API, we are getting a 403 error, then we know that the access token has expired, and then we send the refresh token here to regenerate a new access token. You can see refresh token result with base query, sending the link to the refresh token endpoint, the API, and extra options. So once the data is returned back, we dispatch set credentials. So we haven't done this yet. We haven't created this function yet, but we'll be doing that now. To set the credentials, we pass in the new token that we received from the endpoint here, and set the result as the, all this we are just setting this is where we now await the base query. We call the endpoint again. Remember, when we called it the first time, we're getting a 4.3 signifying that the access token has expired. So after requesting for a new access token here, we call the endpoint again to revalidate it. So in this case, now I'll just like to quickly mention some things, especially in concern with the token service. So in the case where you have eaten an endpoint to request for a new access token, then you don't need to set the expiry date for this 2 year. So what you can do is you can just comment this out, because when it expires, if you set the expiry date, it will delete it automatically from your browser, and you don't want that to happen, because you want to send in the access token to request for a new send in the refresh token. So you can just to request for a new access token. So it is this refresh token you need to comment out. You don't really need to comment out this access token expiry date, but you can comment it out for safety, because it depends on how the backend developer design the endpoint. There are some, they will design the endpoint in such a way that it needs to also receive the expired access token. So once it receives the expired access token and it sees that it has expired, it will regenerate a new access token immediately. Whereas in some other backend, you need to call a separate endpoint to request, like we have here, for the refresh, to request for a new access token. So both of those cases are already covered in this API implementation here. And once you have this, you don't really need to worry about anything. So the next thing we want to do is go straight into our Redux implementation. We are going to work on our Auth slice. But before we work on the Auth slice, we are going to work on the Auth API slice. So inside the features here, we are going to create a new folder called the Authentication folder. And then here we have a file called Auth API slice.js. And then this is where we create the mutations that will hit this endpoint, the login and probably the create account endpoint. So to do that, let me just walk you through the code. First of all, we get the base endpoint here. Let me close this so that we can have a full view of what is going on. We fetch the base endpoint here, and then we create the API slice here. Export const Auth API slice, which is equals to API slice which is imported from our API file dot inject endpoints, and then there we create our base endpoint, and we pass in fetch base query, pass in the base URL to be the base endpoint, and then we create the endpoint using the builder. Oh, that's a mistake. Builder.mutation. Why is this thing? Builder.mutation. And then the query. The query where we pass in this set credentials, or the credentials. And then we have the URL, which will be the endpoint, the login endpoint. In this case, it's going to be user/login. And then the method, which is going to be a post. And then we have the body of the request. So in this case, we're going to destructure the credentials. So this is basically our auth. And then I'm just going to paste that of the I'm going to paste that also for the create account also. So what you can see here, we have that. I've created also one for use create API slice, for creating an account. Credentials is passed also here. Posts, we are hitting the endpoint user / create, and then we need to export both of these. We need to export them. So I'm just going to. So one thing to note is that this use API slice, which is this API slice for this endpoint, which is the login endpoint here. We are destructuring use login mutation from it. But if you check, there's nothing like use login mutation. But because we are using a mutation here and the name here is login, so you precede the name with use and then camel case the name of whatever you have here, which is login, and then add mutation also, which is camel case. So to it, so that it can, because we are using a mutation. If it's a query, this is going to be query. But since you are using mutation here, most times you use mutation when you are expecting a specific, when you are sending data and expecting a response. But you use query for fetching, just for fetching data. If you want to fetch data, that's when you use query. So that is said that about that. Let me save this. And then the next thing is the auth slice. Auth slice. So here, this is where we create our slice. This is where we create our slice, and export the data. So the first thing we want to do here is we want to create our auth slice, which is the auth slice equals to create slice. Create slice. After doing that, we name our slice, which is auth, AUTH, and then initial state, we set that to user as null and token as null also. So after doing that, we create our reducers. And the first reducer is the set credentials that was used in the API. So set credentials. I'm going to use a arrow function here, passing the state and the action. So then we get in the response. From action.payload. So this should be const from action.payload, and we decode the const, decoded user. We decode the user, which will be JWT the code. Passing the response dot access token. So after we've done that, we set the state dot user is equals to decoded user, while state dot auth is equals to the token, which will be the response dot response dot access token. So after we've done that, then we want to save the token in the local in the cookie. So that will be the token service dot update local access token, passing the response. Some of you might notice that I'm not importing the files, it is being imported automatically for me. So if you look here, you can see the JWT that has been imported, the token service has been imported, create size has been imported. So once it suggests and I press enter, it automatically imports it. So also we need to create the logout function. So here what we just want to do is set state.user to null, state.auth to null, and then remove the token from the cookie. So that will be dot remove user. So that is that about that. Then the next thing we want to do is export our reducers, so here will be export const set credentials and log out. We export it from auth slice dot actions, and then we also export the default reducer. That will be export default auth slice dot reducer, and then we need to also export our helper functions for getting the current user and for getting current token. So to do that, I'm just going to paste that, not to waste time, because that's just fairly. So what we do here is we check if state.auth.user exists and then return it, else we return null. And also for the token, also passing the state, check if state.auth.token exists, returns it, or else if it doesn't exist, we do what return null. Also you can as well just return state.auth.token, which if it doesn't exist, it will return null. If there's no data in it, it will be null. So let's just, but in that case, you don't really need to. But let's say I did this so we can check if the state is ready, because once you refresh the application, your Redux code will need to run all over again, and we are working with a server first application, which is JS. It's unlike React, which isn't really a server first. So what this does is that at some point state might be undefined. So that was why I did this. So that is that about that. So now we have our Auth slice ready. So the next thing we want to do is we want to create our store. So I'm going to create that in the root of the Redux folder. And then I'm just going to paste the code. Then one other thing I want to mention is that Redux is a client application. It runs on the client, not on the server. So most times, we are working with Next.js, you might need to include use client in your code. So here I'm putting use client, but to be on the safer side, you can just include use client in all these places also. So I'm just going to do that to ensure that it runs on the client. Use client. I'm also going to set this to a client. So we already have that. So for our store, basically what we did here is, create our store, and then using configure store, create our reducer, add the API reducer part there, and then the auth reducer, we don't have a user reducer yet, so I'm gonna remove this. The auth reducer is the auth reducer here. I'm going to remove this also, and then so the middleware, we set the middleware, and then DevTools, it checks if you're on production. If you're not on production, DevTools becomes true. If you're on production, it becomes false. So that is that about that. I'm going to save that. Save this also. Make sure I've saved everything. So that is that about that. We've done that. Then the next thing is to create the provider. So unlike React, our provider is going to be a separate component which we will wrap around our application rather than importing it straight in the root of our application. And the reason is because we want to make our provider also a client component. So we're going to create a provider here, provider.js, and in the provider is just a simple code, which is we import our store, we add use client, import our store, import provider from react-redux, create a component, with the provider, passing the store, passing the children, which is the whatever other pages, whatever page we wrap around this. So that is that about that. Now we're going to import this in our layout file. So so you can choose to import it anywhere in your document. So I'm just going to do it here, wrap it around. I can choose to wrap it around this style component, but let me just wrap it around these children instead. So I'm going to make, but it depends on your implementation. If you are dispatching, if you want to dispatch an action to control your team also, you might want to make it the root, the first wrapper around your application. So this is going to be provider, Redux provider. Import the Redux provider. Then I'm going to move this here. So I'm just going to reformat this. Just format document. Then save it. So let's run our application and see what's happening. Yan dev. I hope we are not forgetting anything. So let's check. Let me refresh this. So we have an error, and it is at the API. Token service was imported wrongly. Go back to my API. And what I'm just going to do is delete this. And where is token service? You import it from here. Import token service. So, okay, our application is running, but for now we can still access dashboard.home. You can still access this. And we can, so what I want to do is make it a private route. The dashboard should be a private route. So if you are not logged in, we should not have access to this dashboard. So how can we do that? We'll do that by creating our own private routes. So to do that, I'll go to the library folder, create a new component, which will be require authentication component. I'll make it require auth.js. And then in this place, what we want to do is define I'm just going to paste the code and then explain what it does. So what we did here was create a constant that tracks the route. This is our private route. So you can include all your private route in this array. So you can choose to, if you have more than one private route, you can just edit this, each of them should be the link to each private route you want protected. So in this case, we have only one private route, which is the dashboard home. And what we did here is we created a state for the user, fetch the current user from Redux, select current user. Remember this function. For those of you that do not remember, let me open it for us. Remember this helper function we add here. So we are getting the current user, getting the path name, the current path of the page, the current, which is this path name is this route. This is the path name from the root of your application. Then the route is your path name. So we're getting the path name. Create a reference to push from use router, and I must emphasize this use router is next navigation, not next router. From Next.js 13, I think that has changed from next/router to next/navigation. So we destructure push from it, and then in our use effects here, we check if current user exists and if the current path name is, and we check if user does not exist and the current path is a private route. So if user is not logged in and we are trying to access a private route, we immediately push the user to the login page, and here what I'm doing is setting the state to the user. So when we come here, I'm going to comment this out just to demonstrate some things, and then save it. So what we're going to do here is now we're going to go to our dashboard layout. In Next.js setting, you can have different layouts for different sections of your application. So for example, this dashboard might have a different layout. Most times it's recommended, for example, now the dashboard might have a sidebar which is not present in your normal application. So in that case, you can use the layout to structure that. And the reason why this folder is in brackets, is a naming convention for folders, for our route. What I'm telling Next.js here is that this is just a naming convention. Don't read this as a route, but read whatever is inside of this as a route. So it's going to read this dashboard as a route, and then home also as a route. So whatever is inside dashboard/home, it must be named page for you to pick it as the component for this route. So this layout will wrap around whatever is inside this dashboard route, all the folders inside. So you can have a dashboard/home/users. This layout will wrap around everything. So in this layout now, this is where we want to import the authentication wrapper. So I will just look for the require auth. This is it, the require auth. Import it, wrap it around the children, and save it. So let's see, we're getting an error. Loader, the loading component. We've not yet created the loading component. So what I'm going to do is comment that out for now. I'm still going to do that, but I just want to show you one or two things while we are using a loader there. So now, if I try to access the dashboard route, it will redirect me, but there's a problem. Let's try it. The problem is, you can see that it pushed me back to the home page, but we still get to see the dashboard home page briefly. You can see it. I don't know if you can see it. We still get to see it briefly. You can see the content of the page briefly before being pushed out. We don't want that to happen. We don't want that to happen at all. So the way to do that, what is happening there is that because of Next.js iteration process, it is showing the page, before every other thing is loaded. So what we want to do is, while everything is still loading, we want to display a separate page rather than the page itself, the dashboard page itself. So that's where the loader comes in. We need to have a loader component and then display it if the user is not active. So we're going to create a component folder inside the app folder, and create a loader component, loader.js. So this is just going to be a very simple loader, but you can always customize it as you want. So this is just a client component, with the text loading. I'm gonna save that. Let me take this forward a little bit. I'm going to centralize this loading. So I'm just going to come to this dashboard, copy the container. I'm going to use the container, to wrap things around that. That should be the dashboard here, the container here. This is style component. For those who don't know what this is, it's basically styled component. So I'm going to import the style here, and then I'm going to wrap this around the loading. So after creating our loading, let's just put 1, 2, 3 dots. Going back to our require authentication, and then we're going to import the loader here. So I'm going to uncomment this out and then import this. So you can see, so what we're doing here is checking if user.email, there's nothing, if it doesn't exist, if the user object doesn't contain an email, which means that the user is not yet set, so we are going to be displaying the loader. So if we do this now, save this, go back to this and try to access the dashboard home, what we see is the loading component instead. So no matter the page you wrap the require auth against, it would not show the page, it will return the loading component as long as the user is not logged in. So now let us try logging in. We're gonna clear this. This is from the previous application. So now I'm going to log in. Click on login. That should set the new access and fresh token. But there is a problem. I think there's a problem here. Let's see what is happening. Okay, I think this is coming from start component, which can be fixed. So we're not going to worry about this because this is not a start component tutorial. So I'm going to refresh this, reload this, and then I'm going to let me reload this. Good. And then I'm going to try to submit the form. Oh, sorry, I have not yet implemented the login page. So let's go to the login page. So in this page, we just have a container form, a custom input for the email, for the password, and the submit button, which calls the submit function, which is here. So I'm accessing the email and the password from the ref. It's a simple implementation. So I'm not going to go into validation and all that. That is not the purpose of this tutorial. I'm just going to show you how to log in straight out. So what we're going to do is we're going to import this login. This login is imported from our use login mutation. So I'm going to import it here. You can see use login const. We are destructuring the login from use login mutation. Let me import this. You can also get those this state is error, success, error is loading. So to check if the API is loading, if you have an error, you can get the error from this error object. If it's successful, you can get it from the success variable, and then is error. Also to check if there's an error, if there's an error in the while trying to access the resource. So what we're doing here is, calling the login endpoint, passing our email and password. And then when we receive a response, we set the dispatch response. So I can as well cut this and put it inside of this instead. So this will only happen if the response is successful. So once the response is successful, it shows a toast notification. I'm going to import this from toast. So if you are wondering how to use this toast notification, you can check my other tutorials, on toast, using a toast notification in a Next.js application, and then we push the user to the dashboard if it is successful. So having done that, let us see, and if we have an error, we log the error. So let's now see what will happen. Let us try to log in. So I'm gonna refresh this again. And then I'm going to log in. So it seems it's not yet working. You have dispatch is not defined. Okay, I think I didn't import dispatch there. So it's working. Apparently it's working. So I'm gonna use dispatch, and then const dispatch is equals to use dispatch. Let's go back, then log in again. Set credentials is not defined. Another error. I'm gonna check that I make sure push to this push should be from use router instead of router here. I'm going to destructure push from router. Push. So I think we are ready. Okay. So we're gonna go here. Now our cookie. Submit. You should set the cookie. Let's see what's the problem again. So what's the problem? Invalid hook call. That's page 34. So which hook am I calling there? Oh, there's a mistake here. This should be dispatch. So I'm gonna log in again. This should take us finally. You can see the toast notification. Successfully logged in. Then it redirects us to the dashboard. So if you check your cookie now, you have the refresh token and the access token, but then there's a problem. We are not yet done. I can go to the login page, go back to the dashboard page. I can access the dashboard page, but then there's a problem. And this is a problem with Redux, not our application. The problem is that Redux tends to lose state once you refresh the page. So this access and refresh token and the current user object, Redux would lose reference to it. It will not persist it. Once we refresh, you are going to see, once I refresh this page, it's probably going to send me back to the login page because the state has been, it has lost state. So I'm going to show you that. I'm going to refresh. You can see loading and it pushes me out. But if you check your cookie, the refresh and the access token is still there. But what happened is because Redux lost state because I refresh, and that is what is always happening in Redux. It loses state when you refresh. So how are we going to tackle that? Because it doesn't make sense for us to log in and then once you refresh, the user is logged out. It doesn't make sense. So what are we going to do there? So what we're going to do is we're going to go into our Auth slice and we're going to tackle the problem here. Initial state, you can see here, initial state is set to null. So that is exactly what is happening. When we are refreshing, this is rerunning. This Auth slice reruns and then set the state to null, the user and the token. So the way we can correct that is very simple. We are going to set the initial state to what is in the cookie. We're going to get the user from the cookie, and we're also going to get the token from the cookie and set it as the initial state. So now our initial state is this. I'm just going to paste it here and then make sure, I think I've imported this already, the token service. I've imported it. So what I'm doing here is setting the initial state to be the user, getting it from the cookie using the token service to get the user, and the token also getting the access token, setting it. So I'm going to save this. So you can see now I should be able to access the dashboard home. You can see, and I can refresh and the state is persisted. You can see. So we have successfully fixed that issue. Some people also like to persist all of their states, all the states, or persist the whole store at itself by storing it in either local storage, or the equivalent. So you can also use IndexedDB to store it, but I'm not going to go into that into this tutorial. So we've gotten that, we've learned how to use mutation, but we have not yet learned how to use query. So I'm just going to show you a quick way you can also use query to fetch, data from an endpoint. We said we use mutation when you are sending and receiving data, like this. When most times, like I'm sending my login credentials and I'm receiving a data from the endpoint at the same time, But query is most times when you are just using it to fetch just want to fetch data. You are already authenticated. You want to fetch data. You want to get users, get data generally from the backend. So I'm just going to create another feature here called users. And in this, this is just a bonus. It is not most tutorials are not going to show you how to do this, but I'm going to show you. So I'm going to create a user API slice like we created for the Auth API slice.js. I'm just going to paste the code so I can explain to you guys. So we'll create our API user API slice by injecting the endpoint. Fetch the base query, fetching base query, passing the base URL with the base endpoint, and then endpoint here using builder. We are getting users using, this time it is builder.query, not builder.mutation. And then the query is just going to be URL. Don't need method since it's supposed to be just a get. We are fetching user/all. Get a single user. You can see how we created it here, and then we use the structure use get user query. Remember what I told you about this? I'm camel casing what I got here. Should I call it Pascal case? It should be Pascal case. But I added use to the front and then query to the end. This is how it's going to work, and then also use get single user query. I think if you don't use this format, it's not going to work. I'm not completely sure, but I don't think it's going to work. This is the way that was stated in the documentation. So now that we've done that, we need one more thing, our user slice. So that will be the user slice.js. Then in the user slice, also I'm just going to paste the code. The finished project will be on GitHub, so you can have access to it and take a look at it. I'm going to remove unused import here. So basically what we are doing here is we name our user slice users. Initial state is set to null. If you want to persist, you can implement whatever implementation you want to persist. But there's no really need to persist these users to get all users. There's no need. I don't see a need to persist it. But according to your implementation, according to your need, you can always change that. And then we have the reducers here, the set reducers, where we get the users from the action payload and set them. Clear user also. And then we export the actions and export the reducer here. A helper function also, we export it here. So that is that about that. So how do we use this? So I'm just going to show you the implementation in the dashboard page. I'm going to show you how you can do that here. So it's very simple, very, very simple. You just need to import the get user query. Let me split this screen and show you so that you can understand what is going on. So we are using this as an example. You can also use this for those of you that I'm just going to show you an example. I'm going to comment it out though of how to fetch this also. So this is an example here. So yeah, here we import the data directly from useGet. user. So I'm just going to console log the data. Console.log users data. And then let's go to the you can see immediately we get the user data. You can see it's being fetched immediately. So this is how you use query. You don't need any other thing, you don't even need to dispatch an action, but if I want to set this to the state now, I need to dispatch an action to set the data into the state. But you can just see now for the single user, you can get that. Let me uncomment the code. It's because I have used data here, I can also use data, so I changed the name here to single user. From here also you can import all these, all these progress check. Is loading, is error, check. Also the error object, you can import it also here. So here you remember that here we are passing a ID to get the single user. So all you need to do is pass the ID here. And you can console log the single user that the structure that I renamed here, the data, the response I renamed here. So once I pass in, for example, 12 here, that's going to be the ID here, and it's going to send to the backend to get user / whatever ID it is, and returns the data here as single user. So you can use that for whatever you want to use. So that has brought us to the end of this tutorial. I'm not going to be running that because I have not yet implemented this endpoint in the backend. So I'm just showing you how you can do it. So that brings us to the end of this tutorial. Thank you for watching. You can see our website is ready with Redux implementation. If you refresh it again, we are going to, you can see we are still logged in and we still get the user data. Initially it was undefined, while it was still fetching, then it fetched the data here. So you can use a use state to track the value once it is, the data is ready. You can even use is loading to check. Okay, let me use that. Let us console log the state before we bring this whole thing to an end. Is loading. So I'm just gonna CV. Is loading. Let me refresh it. You can see it's loading is true here. Undefined. Next.js seems to always throw this error once in a while. I think it's a problem with webpack config. It can be fixed. I'm just going to refresh it to get rid of the error. So you can see here, its loading is set to true, and then false when the data was ready. You can see. So you can use this to track the value, and then act in accordance. So thank you. So one last thing, I'm going to clear the cookie, and you're going to see that it's going to, once we refresh it, will log us out. You can see we are automatically logged out. You can see. So that brought us to the end of the tutorial. That brings us to the end of the tutorial. See you next time.